Hi, hello again. Today we're going to be talking about polygon and NURBS modeling. Um, Modeling is the first stage in creating something in a 3D software or package like Maya. It's the bedrock of all, how will I put it now, of all creation, as it were. If you look at the movies that we see today, especially those that are heavily CG, that have heavy CG work in them, um, things have to be modeled from cars to humans to buildings before you create any kind of animation. Structures have to be built. Um, Systems of filling your frame with set and props. All those things have to be built, and the you have to model them. All right. So that's um, that is why this is important, because you can't create something, you can't do anything without creating something first of all. Now, what you create, you can change, you can evolve it. All right, but you have to create something first of all, and so that's why we have to talk about this first, because if you are going to animate something, if you're going to do some kind of dynamic movement or dynamic change with something, you have to create it first. All right. So think of yourself as a kind of mini god right now. Have to create the world that you um, are going to now effect changes or effect motion or transitions with. You have to create them first. Right. So that's why we're talking about modeling. Um, in most cases, there are two most important ways of modeling objects in a 3D scene. There is a third one. We may not talk too much about it, but at least I will name it so you can probably research. But the two we are going to talk about mostly today are the fundamental modeling techniques that you will probably come across no matter what 3D software you use. All right. So have to take note of this too, because that's how you're going to do a lot of what you're going to do in terms of modeling. All right. So I'm going to talk about NURBS and polygon modeling. Now, NURBS is an abbreviation for um, the word non-uniform rational B-splines. That seems like um, a mouthful. All right. And if you are wondering what does all that mean, I would advise that you don't focus too much on the name and what it means, but focus on the technique and please understand it and understand the advantage or disadvantage. Yeah. So I will just do a bit of a definition. All right. Lay definition so that you don't get bogged down with the details. All right. So non-uniform rational B-spline. What does this mean? It's the representation of a curve through complex mathematical formulas. Right? Uh, how would I put this well? It's a way of following mathematically accurate mathematical um, formulas of points and surfaces to create or depict analytic or modeled shapes. Um, a more lay, if I can use that way to talk about it, to say that uh, you can create a surface mathematically or create a curve mathematically, and not uses that accurate model of creating a curve from point All right, and using that as the model or the basis for creating shapes. All right, the immediate in your mind, if you just imagine it, the immediate take away from that is that every line, every curve, every object that you create will be mathematically correct and thus accurate in the way it measures smoothness of the surface and all the properties of this object. Now, the same thing that makes it look like an advantage can also be a disadvantage in that life is not essentially accurate. Surfaces are not always straight or absolutely smooth. All right. Sometimes there's a lot of variation and texture in surfaces, and you want to kind of represent that in your 3D object. And so knobs may not work for you because every object, every surface that you create with this knobs technique will always maintain that accurate, consistent smoothness and curvature of line. All right. So that is why we move. That is why I'm now going to talk about polygon models. Now, polygon are based or are made up of n-sided shape. Are made up of an n-sided shape. N meaning any number of sides. All right. So you can be talking about we a rectangle is square. We know that it is made up of four sides. All right, that make the shape of the square, and then there is an area that is bound by those four sides. All right, and those four sides, that area becomes the surface of this shape. In the same way, a polygon can be any number of um, shapes, all right, consisting of a corner or a vertex, as it is called in most 3D softwares, um, which just means corner, uh, four corners, four edges or straight lines. Now, straight lines connect the points together. If I can just pull up a picture that will explain this a little more. All right. So you can see that this on this surface, this face, another way that surfaces are the area bounded by the edges and the points is called face. All right. So the vertices being the corners, the edge being the lines that join the points, and the face being the area that is bound by all this. That is a polygon. That is how you deduce what a polygon is. Now you can have four sides, which is what we will call a square, and when the points at the edges are not exactly perpendicular, then they become rectangles or other shapes or diamonds or so on. You can have five-sided shapes. Then you can have any number of shapes. All right. Maya puts a limit on how will I put this? Not a limit per se, because you can make a surface of as many sides as you want. That's the flexibility that a polygon uh, gives you, but it gives a control, a standard of four sides for any surface that should maintain accuracy and maintain its efficiency foresight. So if you are creating an object and your size of your object are either less than or more than foresight, the software package usually recommends that you try and rearrange the surface and the shapes to point to make sure that you achieve four-sided polygon. All right. Now, a combination of many faces like this creates a mesh. All right. So like it says, a polygon models are composed of many separate polygons combined into a polygon mesh. Alright, so if you are creating a human head, for instance, you can see each of these boxes, they are all polygons. Now, joined together, they make up a mesh, they make up an object. So a box is made up of polygons that are 6 polygons as it were. 6 polygons make up a box. And you go on and on like that to describe other objects, for instance, that are made up of n of faces. All right. So let's go back into our software. So that's the basic definition. Already, um, you will begin to note some of the differences in how NURBS surfaces are created and how the polygon is created, and some of the possibilities that you will have based on that. Now, I have a short list that I will go through and try and explain some of these before we show some practical examples, as it were. Um, so, polygons, they are easy to manipulate. All right, we have talked about the fact that they are made up of vertices, edges, and faces. All right, with those points, with those many points of um, editing points, as it were, you can imagine how you can move each of those points to create new things. Faces can be extruded out to create um, extensions of the initial face and so on. Polygons, on the other hand, is made up of this mathematical equation of a square. And so all you do with that one square. All right. Every modification, every deformation you do on that one square that you have. Now you can put many squares together to create a complex object, but every every unique object that you create is made up of a square. All right. So you may only, like, just thinking about that, you can't do a lot with a nut surface in terms of creating complex looking shapes. Yes, people can do this, but it's a lot of work for results that you will probably still not be happy with in terms of complexity. Now, if you are trying to create objects that are smooth, right, that knobs is the way to go. You will get accurate, smooth objects all the time. But you will not be able to create objects that are complex in the way certain parts deform or twist or so on and so forth. All right. So again, going back to our list here, um, some of them you may not understand right now. All right, but we will explain them later on. So you can have infinite sides. Remember, we talked about the fact that they are n-sided objects. So you can have as many sided or face objects or polygons as you want. All right. So let me just put this aside here. Um, surfaces are made up of vertices, edges, and faces. It is generally easier to use. All right. It is easy to attach, which means that when you have multiple objects, you can always merge things together and create even more complex objects. Um, can be modeled as single continuous surface. All right. Um, you can take a simple box and with the use of polygons of the faces, of the edges, of the vertices, you can do very complex stuff. And what I've talked about extruding a face, I will show you a bit of that soon. And just get you to see how that can make your work a lot faster in terms of creating complex objects from a simple object. Um, Obviously, because they are made up of faces, um, everything will have a face. So you can't completely have a smooth face or smooth combination of faces. Yes, it can be done, but it takes a lot of time. You are much better at converting to subdivision. Subdivision is the third or subdivision modeling, third method of modeling. So we're not going to really talk a lot about it, but suffice to say that it is basically a joining of the best advantages of both NURBS and polygon modeling. But we won't talk about it in detail. So again, if I go through the some of the attributes of NURBS, all right, it is smoother. You will always get smooth results from a NURBS surface, accurate, mathematically smooth surfaces. Um, if I bring you to this particular line, it says it only has you only have four sides to every node. Like I told you, it is a rectangle that mathematically you now deform to create smooth surfaces of anything. So, but because it is a combination of mathematically placed points and curves that now join those points, you will only always have four sides, right? You will only always have four sides. There are a few other aspects here that you may not be able to understand fully. We'll talk about them as we go on in later classes. Alright, but that's just a list from, if I can say that, of some of the advantages and disadvantages, alright, of polygons versus, if I can use that, polygons or not surface modeling. So we're going to get into a bit of the practical here and show how to uh, do some of this stuff. All right. Um, okay. Let's talk about polygon modeling first, and then talk about knob surfaces and what you can do, and then finish off with what you can do with one or the other. All right. So if you remember, we talked about our shelves. One of the shelf tabs is called the Polygon shelf tab. Another thing that I need to take you back to is what we talked about here, which is the menu set. All right, and that is menu set in more in later versions of Maya. You can see polygons directly as one of the menu sets, as opposed to modeling that used to be in some other packages. So you want to click that, and then so it changes and adds or changes your additional menu set there to show you tools and functions and menus that have to do with modeling. Alright, so we talked about this in our last class, but I'll just go through how to create a polygon of a sphere, a square, a cylinder. Just go through those. So you drag on your grid. If you don't have the grid showing, you want to come to display grid. Alright, display grid to show that. Okay. Um, I know I may not have shown you this before, but one of the ways that you move around in your 3D space is to use your Alt and your left mouse button. Alright, so if you hold onto your Alt and then click and drag in your 3D scene, you'll be able to move in complete without any without being constrained to any axis. You'll be able to move uh, your scene uh, in any axis that you want. All right. Um, so you can do that, and then try and come into the same kind of view that I have there. You come to your tool bar which we talked about yesterday and pick the move tool. All right, then you can move it and make sure that it matches with the ground plane. It is surface of our grid. All right, so this is a sphere. This is a polygon sphere. All right, that you have created in your scene. Um, all right, that's that. You can create a cube also with the same way you drag to create the base and then you drag upwards to create the height of the cube. Alright, already you see that we start with this six-sided cube. Alright, um, and if I can just show you one of the ways to see some of the other stuff that this object has as components. How do we get to, we're talking about cubes, talk about edges, all right? But how do we select them and make them editable? There are two ways, which is you can come to the select by component type, all right, and click on it. Notice that your vertices are always the default selection, all right? So with that, you can see this purple point, all right? Let me zoom in. You zoom in by holding Alt and your right and dragging your right mouse button. All right. So you can see the purple point. If you drag a selection box around any of those points, you'll be able to select the point, and you'll see that it changes to yellow to signify that you are selected. It. You also see, depending on where you are holding, either your move tool or your rotate tool or your scale tool, you'll be able to edit that component, that part, that point. Alright. Now you have to be careful so that you are not selecting more than one point. Alright, so if I make my box this long or this wide, the chances are I'm selecting this one and that one at the same time. Now that can be useful when you want to move both of them like this. Alright. But when you want to only move one point, and you can just move in to make sure you're not selecting anything else behind that, and then you can pull and push to deform this object. Alright, so you can see just about how flexible this um, polygon modeling is, but you can begin to see how you can use it to create stuff um, quite easily. Alright, um, now that these are our vertices, we want to pick our edge, the edge, this line, alright, that make up our object. Right, remember we said this is the point component, right? You deselect that, we don't see any of those purple lines, then you move through to the line. Notice in the left bottom corner when I hover over it is the select line component. So if I do that, then I can select lines. Now notice how the edges of the object are highlighted. Alright, so if I select these edges, it becomes editable also. So I can pull out that edge by itself. I can pull it out. Alright, I can pull it out and do stuff with it. Not just move, not you can rotate that point. Rotating in that axis won't do anything, but if you do this, you can begin to see how that changes. All right, you can scale and you can see what it does. All right, scaling of course doesn't really do much. Scaling, you can see that. Notice that there is a center box on your scale. This one does uniform scaling across all the axes from the center. All right, so if I click on that small box and I click, it just takes a center scaling of the whole object. Now, so already you can begin to see how you can edit this object just by using the components of the edge and the vertices. All right. Now, one last one that you want to be conversant with a lot is the face. All right. So we can select this vertex, we can select the edge, alright. So how do we select the face? How do we change or work with the faces? Now, again, if I deselect the line component and come to the face component, notice that it shows, please notice this line when I hover over this box. There's select face component, alright. So I click that, and now you can select the faces of your object. Faces of your object. So if I click that, the same thing I've been doing with all the other things, I can do with that too. Um, I can do with any of those two, which is on rotate. You can see, yeah, I can move space, as you can see. One other important object that you will want to keep in your arsenal, alright, for future purposes is the extrude. Now, as you have seen, this is the basic component. This is the basic object. Alright. If you want to extend and begin to do something a bit more complex with your object, how can you do it? Alright. Now, one way that you can, alright, is the extrude action. Alright, you will see that here. Alright. Notice at the bottom corner, help corner, it shows you extrude the selected component. You can extrude faces, you can extrude edges. Alright, but you want to focus on extruding faces. Extruding simply means that you are pulling out a component from the base of that same component. Alright, and when it does that, the face moves up, the face moves in the direction of the extrusion, but it leaves the connection to the edges that created it. Alright, so you can pull something out of something, alright, and still keep that object in its initial state, or keep the connections to the initial base. Alright, so if I select this face, excuse me, and I now click on my extrude button. Now you see that our handle changes. Notice what is different about this face now, about the handles. Alright, you can see that we have almost as if you have all the possible actions that you can perform, that is move, rotate, and scale, all in one place at the same time. Alright. What that does is that it gives you the ability to do all these things to the new component or new section of that space that you have created. So if I wanted to pull a face up, I can pull that face up. Notice how it retains connections to the plates from which it was, from the edges from which it was pulled. Alright, but you can pull this space upwards. Alright, you can also scale that space. Alright, scaling in that axis doesn't work, but scaling in a uniform axis scales that space. You can scale in this direction, you can scale in that direction. Alright, you can even rotate by clicking this circular thing. Then it gives you all the controls for rotation, and then you can rotate, you can rotate, you can rotate in every aspect. Alright, note that it keeps the link to the object from which it was created, to the edges from which it was created. Alright, and already you can see that you can do this multiple times. Alright, so it's not just once, I can do it multiple times, and each time it retains the connection to the former edge base. Alright, um okay, so we see that. Notice these things that show up on the edge, they are used to also edit the object that is being created or formed out of our initial object. So division just simply means um, how many divisions between the first line or edge and this new line or edge, this edge and this new one that's created. So if I hold on this line, you can see the cursor changes, and I drag, you see that the number changes to 2, and in that same place you can see that there are two divisions where there are 1, If I add another one, that's 3, that's 1, 2, 3, all right. And in that same way, you can begin to create more sections out of your initial object. So if I wanted to play around with this more, create something of a type, all right. I can do this, extrude again, pull, okay. Now that can happen. You can have clicked the extrude and you didn't pull up. Alright. Sometimes you can try and see if the new every time you click the extrude, you have already created a new face connecting the old edge and the new edge, so you can still work with it even if your extrude point disappear. Alright. You can work with the faces like it was a normal face anyway. Um, so we do that again, and okay, now so that's enough of this. I can pull that out. All right. So you can see that you can begin to do some really cool stuff just out of our initial object. This initial object and the base that we have. All right. Now, how do you? If I wanted to create a space, so we have done this then right click, and I want to create space here. All right. Now I can do two things. I can either just select this space and delete. All right. Now by select, so you can notice that you can delete any face that you have created. You can delete any face created, and it simply creates a hole that you can see through at that space. All right. So let me just click this and undo this. All right. So we're back with this space. One of the things if I want to do something a little bit more elaborate in creating this pen, I can click on my extrude and notice that extrude doesn't just work to create outward moving things. You can also create a face on the face as well. So if I select the scale and then scale this in place, notice I didn't pull it up, I just scale this in place. You can still see that this is a new face. These are the edges of the old face from which we started. Alright, you can see that we didn't pull out. You do not always need to pull out. You can push in. Anything you can do. Alright, so now that I've pulled it in a bit, then I can extrude again to push it in. Alright, to push it in. And you can see that this begins to look a little more like something that you might see somewhere. Now I can try out delete it, alright? And you can see how we have a vent with a bit of a bevel around it. Right? So already you can begin to imagine the things that we do with this already. There's a lot that you can work out just with one polygon that mesh that you started with. Alright. So I come back to my select object type and click that. And now I'm back in the object mode. Next step is to work with what we have had before and to move them around, move them into place. Alright, so I encourage you to play with the rest of the stuff that you have here, create other shapes, and do the same things we have done simply by being able to select components, in this case face, edge, or vertex. Alright, and what you can do with that at any single point. Alright, so that is a basic show. The same method is used to create things as complex as it is. Alright, you create the initial shape out of squares. This has been triangulated though, alright, but you can, let me show you this. Okay, this is simply a cube. This is kind of thing we did. We selected the face there and then we pushed it in to create an object that has a hole, a cube with a hole inside of it. Alright. These are the other objects in Maya that you can create. You can create a sphere, which we have created. You can create a plane. A plane, you can use a plane to create a floor in your scene. So I do this and I just select that. Alright, and then move it. Since everything you draw will be drawn on the plane, you can always show that you can create a floor. But if it is not at the right place that you need it to be, you can always just move it up or down until you are happy with its position on the environment. Now to show you something in our channel box, alright, you can see that all the transitions we have created, they are showing there. Um you can edit to get something right. Now I've talked about input, I've talked about nodes, alright, and one of the nodes, alright, to the floor, to this plane that I created, and to every object actually, you can see how every action that we create has a history, alright, and you can edit those histories, alright. You can edit each one of those histories that you have created because they are all nodes. So you build every object is a combination of all the nodes that create it. Now you don't need to understand every one of those nodes and what they do, but you need to understand that they are nodes that created so that sometime when you want to go back and edit something that you have done, you can still go back and change without destroying what you have created afterwards. All right. So for every new object that you create, you have the input node. In this plane, the input node is called polyplane one. For this sphere that we created, it's polysphere one. All right. For this one, polycube one. All right. Now, um, I will do something on this plane. Now you can start off with just this bare plane with no division, alright? But if you want to create something with a little more detail, a square, a plane with a little more detail, you, as soon as you have created the object as we have and drag, you click on this polygon and you can see it already shows the width and the height, alright, of this plane. Now, note that it also gives you a subdivision width and height. You can use this to kind of subdivide your plane into more divisions so that you add a little more detail. All right. So if I increase the two of them, all right, you can already see five divisions in the width, five divisions in the height, and you can already count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. So depending, you are in control of that particular ability. If I do the same to the square, all right, and I want to reduce the number of divisions that the square has. Note that it already starts with 20. So if I reduce those, notice how um, the square reduces in the number of divisions that make it up. Alright. Okay. You can notice that the radius also there. So if you increase that or reduce that, you can change the size of This these ones these are different from changing the scale, alright, because these are like input nodes. They are not nodes or the information that start the creation. You don't have to end it that, alright. So you can always scale this to do something or do the same thing as that, but you can now begin to do more because you have more controls on all aspects of this um shape. All right. Now, for this complex object that we have, if you go back to its first input node, polycube one, and try and add, not that it has three because it's a cube, it has doesn't just have length and breadth, so it also has height. So that's why that if I increase that, Maya, the object just breaks down. That is because you have already done other edits, all this other stuff on top of it, alright? And so that makes it difficult for Maya to calculate um, adding its own divisions on an object that you have already worked on. So usually if you want to add divisions like this, alright, do them before you start tweaking and moving points, alright? That way you don't get this crazy looking object that you have just done now, alright? So and that's something to always know. Yeah. Now I could go on and show you a lot of other stuff, but I will just stop here, but I think already I've already shown you how you can, all that you can do.